the gaze gradually cleared from a blinding blood red. There was no cold hospital ward, no faint beeping of ECGs. What reached my ears was the hum of a projector fan and waves of familiar, nauseating chorals. I lowered my head, looked at my long, whole fingers with not a scratch, then looked up at the electronic wall clock. It's showing 3 years ago. I have been reborn, back to the day that completely ruined my life. What's wrong, Wenjing? Everyone's waiting for you. With such a big project, as the team leader, you can't drop the ball at the last moment. The speaker was David, my direct supervisor. He was dressed in a crisp suit, his face wore a signature kindly smile, but the eyes behind the gold-rimmed glasses glittered with calculation and greed. Next to him sat Chloe in a designer dress. She held a cup of coffee, a trace of undisguised mockery at the corner of her mouth, floating lightly to add, "Yes, Wenjing, this client is something David fought hard to get for you. As long as you sign the contract, you'll get your commission later as well. If you hesitate now, do you want our department to stay doing poorly? In my past life, I was blinded by their synchronized moral coercion. I thought this was leadership valuing me, this was colleagues trusting me, and I unhesitatingly signed my name on the contract. The result was that the contract had extremely covert unlimited joint liability clauses and technical delivery loopholes. As soon as the project had problems, David and Chloe immediately shifted all responsibility away, forging a pile of evidence that I took bribes from the other party and secretly edited contract terms. I was not only fired by the company but also burdened with multi-million debts, and finally, with no way out, I died in a car accident. Thinking of this, my heart trembled violently, and a cold hatred surged up in an instant. But I did not show a shred of emotion on my face. I slowly looked up, revealing a slightly apologetic and tired smile. "Sorry, I was a bit dizzy just now, I didn't react in time." "If you're dizzy, sign quickly, and after signing, go back to your seat and rest." David impatiently pushed the thick contract toward me, even thoughtfully slipping a pen into my hand. "Everyone's waiting for the meeting to break up, don't waste time." I took the pen, my fingertips turning pale. The contract had turned to the last page. The lettering seals of the other party's company were stamped, only my signature remained. I knew that if I suddenly refused to sign on the spot, David would immediately administratively punish me for disobeying company orders or neglect of duty, even confiscate my work computer on the spot, so I wouldn't have access to crucial evidence later. I must make him think I'm still that pliant pushover easily manipulated. I lowered my head, pretended to study the contract carefully, but in fact, I shielded their line of sight with my body. On the signing line, I wrote my name. But I did not write in a proper, neat script as before. At the moment the pen tip touched the page, my fingers trembled slightly, and I deliberately made the strokes of the name extremely blurred. Even at the edge of the name, I quietly scratched a faint alteration mark with my fingernail. This level of alteration, in legal reviews and technical appraisals, would be enough to prove a fatal loophole showing that there was a dispute at signing or that the signer's true intention was not fully expressed. At the same time, the hand tucked in my pocket had long been skilled at pressing the phone's recording button. "David, the delivery schedule for the technical part of this contract is too tight, and the liability for breach is all on our side. The other party hasn't even paid the basic prepayment yet. Is it really okay to sign now?" I looked up, the voice carrying just the right amount of unease and hesitation. David furrowed his brows, the hypocrisy on his face almost slipping, and his tone grew stern. "What do you know? This is industry practice. Clients are our bread and butter. If you don't even dare take this risk, do you still want to stay in this company? If something goes wrong, I'll shoulder it. What are you afraid of? Sign quickly." "Exactly, Sister Wenjing, you're always afraid of wolves at the gate and tigers behind you. No wonder you've never risen to manager." Chloe teased from the side, elongating her voice in a taunting tone. "David already said he'll cover for you, why pretend to be noble?" Okay, with David's words, I'm relieved. I pretended to be persuaded, nodding, and handed over the signed contract. David snatched the contract, and after confirming the signatures, a cunning smile flashed in his eyes. He stood up, patted my shoulder hard. "That's more like it." All right, meeting adjourned. Wenjing, tidy the remaining documents, you must hand everything over to the client today. Colleagues filed out of the conference room one by one. As Chloe passed by me, in a voice only the two of us could hear, she sneered, "Idiot." I sat quietly at my desk, watching their backs disappear, a cold arc curling at the corners of my mouth. I reached into my pocket and touched the phone still recording. Here, a clear record of David's verbal promise of I'll shoulder it if something goes wrong, and their coercion to sign was captured in full. In a previous life you climbed up by stepping on my blood and flesh, and in this life, I will make you hand me the knife you gave me and drive it into your own hearts. I tidied the documents on the desk, stood up, and walked out of the conference room. As I stepped out of the meeting room, the blinding fluorescent lights in the corridor stretched my shadow. Chloe and David were walking ahead, shoulder to shoulder, whispering to each other, occasionally accompanied by a knowing chuckle. In their eyes, I was still the loyal, hard-working soft target they could pin everything on at any moment. But I didn't return to my desk, not even glancing at the water bottle or personal belongings on the table. I headed straight to the elevator, pressed the button for the first floor. The doors closed slowly, sealing off those hypocritical smiles outside. I took a deep breath. The cold air flooded into my lungs, yet it sharpened my mind like never before. The painful lessons from my past life were vivid, and in this life, I would not give them any chance to drag me down, or to use public opinion and morality to trap me. Stepping out of the company building, the afternoon sun spilled onto the street, and the bustling traffic rushed toward me. I had no hesitation whatsoever and turned the corner into the nearest mobile service store to the company. "Hello, please cancel this mobile number and process the account closure." I handed the clerk my ID card and the SIM card I had been using for nearly 5 years, speaking with a calm, unruffled voice. The clerk took them, glanced at them with some surprise, and said, "Ma'am, this number has a high balance of points and is linked to many social accounts. If you cancel, all your contacts will be unable to reach you. Are you sure you want to cancel right away?" "Certainly, immediately, right now," I replied with determination. This old number held the contact details of all my colleagues, my superiors, and those conniving clients. In my previous life, when the project exploded, this number rang non-stop every minute. Countless insults, accusations, and threats surged like a tide, and David and Chloe hypocritically wore a caring mask, gradually steering me to admit to crimes that never existed. This time, I would sever this poisonous thread once and for all. After completing the cancellation, I immediately bought a brand new SIM card and, in the clerk's presence, snapped the old card into fragments with a decisive crack and threw it in the trash. As the card shattered, a wave of relief washed over me, as if I had physically severed my connection with that dirty quagmire. Next, I used the new number to log back into WeChat. I did not add any old colleagues. Instead, I opened the settings, activated the highest level of privacy protection, and then bulk quit all the company chat groups from the old account, blocked David, Chloe, and all colleagues who habitually taunted me, and completely deleted them. After finishing all this, I walked back to the company building. It was almost the end of the lunch break, and the office slowly grew busy again. I pushed open the HR office door. The HR manager was sipping tea and looked up in surprise when I suddenly walked in. "Wenjing? What's the matter?" I did not respond with words. I pulled a resignation letter I had printed long ago from my bag and, with a crisp, decisive clap, handed it squarely to the center of her desk. "I want to resign. Today is my last day." My voice was soft, but in the quiet office it sounded unusually clear. The HR manager was stunned, the hand holding the teacup hung in the air, brows furrowed. "Wenjing, are you joking? You just signed a major project. Now is the time for the company to make use of you. Resigning now? Are you dissatisfied with the salary? Or is there some misunderstanding with David?" "No misunderstanding, and I am not joking." I looked at her coldly. According to the labor law, I am in the probation extension/contract modification phase, and I have already completed written handover of all established projects under my name. Please process my resignation immediately, issue a resignation certificate, and settle this month's salary. The sound of movement drew the attention of the corridor. David happened to be walking by with a stack of papers, heard the word resignation, his expression immediately changing, and he hurriedly pushed the door open and rushed in. Wenjin! What kind of tantrum are you throwing? David's face turned ashen, and he lowered his voice as he shouted at me, You just signed the contract, the client side just connected, and now you're telling me to resign? Do you know how much damage this will cause the company? Don't you have any professional ethics? At this moment, Chloe, who had heard the movement, came over, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, a cruel spectator's smile on her face. Oh, Wenjin, what play are you putting on? You just had David snap at you in the meeting room, and you feel the need to threaten the company with a resignation? Everyone is fighting for this project, and at a critical moment you drop out. Aren't you a little selfish? Outside the office door, many colleagues also stuck their heads out, pointing and whispering. In their eyes, this was clearly an impulsive and irrational outburst. They even thought I was trying to use the recently signed big deal to bargain with the leadership. Facing the accusations and ridicule from these people, I felt only mockery in my heart. Threaten? I turned my head, fixed my gaze on Chloe's calculating eyes, and gave a cold smile. Chloe, since you think this project is so enticing and think I'm threatening the company, that's great. I will leave all the project's materials and subsequent coordination to you guys at no charge. From now on, this project has nothing to do with me, and all commissions and all credit will belong to you and David. Hearing me say this, both David and Chloe were stunned. In their expectation, once I signed the contract I would be a fish in the net, and in the coming months they could legitimately dump the dirtiest and hardest tasks on me, and when the project finally exploded, they would push me out as the scapegoat. They hadn't counted on my being so resolute, even ignoring severance and project commissions, and demanding to leave that very day. You really think the company can't survive without you, right? David trembled with anger, pointing at my nose and cursing, If you want to leave, go ahead. Hand over all your current work records and account passwords. If anything is missing, you won't get a resignation letter, and you won't get paid. Don't worry, I've already sent the handover documents to the public mailbox. I looked at him calmly, the coldness in my eyes making David step back. As for the resignation letter and salary, the Labor Bureau is only 3 kilometers away. If I don't receive the resignation letter and salary settlement notice before 5 p.m. today, I will directly bring these years of overtime records and the labor contract to the Labor Inspection Bureau to have tea. You can test whether the company can withstand an inspection. The words were forceful and spoke to David's core. He knew very well how many loopholes there were in the company's compliance with employment laws, and he also knew how meticulous I usually was. If we really dragged this to the Labor Bureau, the company would not be able to get away with it. HR manager, seeing the situation getting bigger, hurried to smooth things over. Hey, let's speak calmly. Since Wenjin is so determined, we'll handle it according to procedure. With the HR manager's mediation, the procedures went unusually fast. I signed the final resignation agreement and received the certificate of resignation. I returned to my desk, taking all of my personal belongings with me, leaving nothing but the handbag I carried. All private traces on the computer had long been thoroughly wiped, leaving only a very clean system with no backup contact information. Seeing me lift the bag to leave, Chloe rolled her eyes and deliberately raised her voice, cut, pretending to be noble. If you step out this door, I'll see where you can find work. Without the platform of this company, you're nothing. In a few days, when you crash against a brick wall out there, don't come back crying to David asking to take you in. A few sycophants who usually cluster around Chloe echoed with cold laughter. I stood at the office door, slowly turning around, sweeping a glance over this gang of hateful faces. You beg me? I smiled faintly, that smile carrying a chill that made their spines tingle with unease. Don't worry, I'll never come back. Besides, I'd advise you all to eat well these days, after all. Good days are not many. With that, I spared them no more looks, stepped in high heels, and walked out of the company without looking back. 3 days after I left the company, the sun was shining brightly, and I was sitting in a quiet cafe on the east side of the city, enjoying a long-missed tranquility. At this very moment, the atmosphere on the 30th floor of my former company's Department 1 had dropped to freezing point. The effects of my severed contact were beginning to show. On the first day of the official launch of a major project, the client, local prestigious Hongyuan Group, sent their head of legal and head of technology to the company for the first comprehensive technical detail handover and prepayment verification. In the reception room, David wore a sharp suit, smiling warmly as he brewed the finest tea, while Chloe, dressed in a flamboyant outfit, carried a prepared fruit tray and walked in. Mr. Zhang, Mr. Li, rest assured, our team has prepared this project for half a year. Every detail is foolproof, David said with a sycophantic tone as he personally placed the tea in front of Hongyuan Group's technology director, Mr. Zhang. Mr. Zhang waved his hand, his expression extremely serious, and slammed a thick stack of documents onto the table. Cut the crap. David, we're here today to obtain the underlying source code architecture specification and the third-party security compliance authorization. According to the contract, the on-site testing must start today. And the prepayment can be wired to your account this afternoon. Where are the things? David's smile froze for a moment. He didn't understand the underlying technology at all. All previous technology architecture and compliance reviews had been done by me alone, overnight. In his view, I was merely a compliant tool, and once the contract was signed, things would continuously appear. That. Mr. Zhang, the technical documents are being finalized by our team lead. I'll have her send them to you shortly, David said with a forced smile, signaling to Chloe nearby. Chloe immediately understood and pivoted her hips, leaving the reception room and heading straight to my old workstation. To her, although I had resigned, surely all work materials remained on my computer. However, when she pressed the power button on that machine, she froze in shock. The desktop was completely empty, with the recycle bin wiped clean. Except for a few basic system software, all project files, design drawings, and compliance authorization documents were nowhere to be found. Panic-stricken, Chloe hurriedly opened the company's internal cloud drive and found that the shared folder under my former permissions was also blank. How is that possible? That bitch deleted everything? Chloe screamed in anger, drawing the attention of nearby colleagues. Refusing to accept it, she pulled out her phone and dialed my old number. Sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service. The mechanical cold voice from the handset sent chills down Chloe's spine. She opened WeChat again in an attempt to send me a voice call, but the screen instead displayed red text, message sent but was rejected by the recipient. All of my social accounts had been cancelled, WeChat blocked, phone cancelled, completely disappeared from their world. Chloe panicked completely, running back to the reception room and leaning close to David's ear, her voice trembling with a sob. David. Something's wrong. Wenjing, that bitch, has wiped the computer and cloud drive clean. Her number is dead, WeChat has blocked me. I can't find her at all. What? David almost shot up from his chair, his voice rising by 8 tones in panic. The atmosphere in the reception room instantly froze. Mr. Zhang, the head of Hongyuan Group's expression darkened completely, then he slammed the table and stood up. David. What do you mean? The project is about to go on site today, and you tell me the core materials can't be found? The person can't be contacted? Is this how your company does business? Mr. Zhang. Take a deep breath, calm down. This is a misunderstanding. David's face turned pale, sweat dotting his temples as his voice trembled. It's our former project lead Wenjing. She has some personal grudge against the company and, when she left, privately withheld the technical documents. We're already trying to contact her, or arrange another person to reorganize them. Reorganize? It would take 2 to 3 months to build this architecture from scratch. Do you think I'm stupid? President Zhang trembled with anger. Moreover, in the supplementary agreement Wen Jing signed earlier, she clearly promised that if she couldn't deliver the authorization today, it would be considered a serious breach on your part. President Zhang didn't listen to David's explanations at all, snorted coldly, swept his sleeve, and left. Until you see the complete technical authorization and architecture description, you won't get a single cent of the prepayment. If our online launch is delayed, we'll see you in court. People from Hongyuan Group left in a rage. In the vast reception hall, only David and Chloe remained, exchanging a look in an air thick with silence. Without this multi-million prepayment, the department's capital chain for the project's initial phase would completely collapse. Worse, if the senior management learned that a big client had trouble due to handover errors, their jobs could be at risk at any moment. Back in the office, David could no longer contain his anger and slammed his hand down on the desk. Find them. Use all connections to locate them. Get to her home downstairs, find her relatives, find her friends. I don't believe a living person can just vanish into thin air. The entire department fell into an unprecedented state of chaos and paralysis. Colleagues were forced to drop everything and scour the internet for traces of me, to inquire about my whereabouts. But I had already moved out of my old rented place and changed all my contact information. Everything they did was in vain. Chloe sat at her workstation, frantically scouring my name on various social platforms while tears streamed down her face in fear. And at this moment I sat in a cafe, leisurely sipping a strong latte. I looked out the floor-to-ceiling window at the bustling street outside, as my phone screen lit up with a private message from an accompanying friend. Wen Jing, your former company is completely in chaos today. Hongyuan Group has frozen the collaboration, and David and Chloe are now running around like headless chickens trying to find you. On the fourth day after leaving, I changed into a tailored, sharp suit and stepped into the headquarters of the industry giant Starlight Technologies. Starlight Technologies is the rival of my former company, and the two have battled for market share for years. Jessica, an executive at Starlight Technologies, had privately approached me as far back as 6 months ago, offering a high salary to lure me over. Back then I remained loyal to my original company and declined politely. When Jessica saw me in the elegant president's office, a flash of extreme shock crossed her eyes, followed by a deep, burning enthusiasm. Wen Jing? I've heard you suddenly left your old employer and even changed your contact information. I thought you were retiring. Jessica personally handed me a cup of steaming coffee, her gaze sharpened as she scrutinized me. I took the coffee gracefully, took a sip, and went straight to the point. Jessica, today I'm not here to apply for an ordinary project manager role. I'm delivering you a gift that will solidify Starlight Technologies' position as the industry leader. Jessica raised an eyebrow, leaning slightly forward, clearly stirred by immense interest. Oh? Do tell. From my briefcase, I produced a pre-organized analytical report and pushed it in front of her. David and Chloe are currently frantically trying to salvage their nearly paralyzed Hongyuan Group project, I said calmly, though my eyes carried a sharp coldness. But I know their true capabilities too well. They do not have any core technology delivery capability, and the Hongyuan Group collaboration is on the verge of freeze, with both sides facing a severe trust crisis. Jessica opened the report, her eyes growing wider. The report not only pinpointed the fatal flaws in the original company's technical architecture, but also included an off-the-shelf alternative tailored to Hongyuan Group's pain points, a secret avoidance guide I had refined by blending my past memories with Starlight Technologies' existing technical strengths. Moreover, I continued, dropping the deadliest blow nonchalantly, in order to recover losses, my old company will definitely take a desperate gamble in the next few days, bidding for the annual strategic contract of Yunfeng Group at an extremely low price. This is the only cash flow they can rely on to stay afloat. Yunfeng Group? Jessica gasped. Yunfeng Group is this year's biggest deal in the industry, worth tens of millions, and every major player is secretly competing. Yes. I smiled faintly, my gaze icy cold. I have captured David's bidding habits over the past few years, cost estimation models, and the compliance vulnerabilities that their bids will inevitably exploit. If Starlight Technologies bids according to the plan I've provided, we won't just defeat them with the most perfect architecture. We'll also expose their forged technical qualifications on the spot, causing Yunfeng Group to blacklist them as a supplier." Jessica looked at me, admiration and caution intertwined in her eyes. She's a far-sighted businessman and naturally recognizes the value of this report. "Wenjing, what do you want?" Jessica closed the report, looking at me seriously. "Chief Strategy Advisor position, independent studio resources, and absolute command of this business hunt." I said each word clearly. "Deal." Jessica didn't hesitate to extend her hand to me. That afternoon, I formally joined as Starlight Technologies' Chief Strategy Advisor, moving into an independent office. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the bustling city. I controlled Starlight Technologies' vast resources and quietly wove a giant net. Meanwhile, back at my old company, David and Chloe were like headless flies. The freezing of funds by the Huiyuan Group has put them under enormous financial pressure. To report to the company's leadership, David, as I predicted, has placed all his bets on Yunfeng Group's annual strategic big order. They have no idea that the life-saving straw they are clutching is actually a gallows tailor-made for them long ago. In the following days, I guided Xingyao Technologies' bidding team to perform a dimensionality-reducing reconstruction of Yunfeng Group's bid. At the same time, by precisely exploiting David's personality flaws, I deliberately released a few false inside tips through industry intermediaries, nudging David to make bold fabrications and exaggerations in the technical parameters of the bid. Every step is advancing perfectly according to my script. David and Chloe are immersed in the fantasy of obtaining the large order, even holding internal celebrations at the company, unaware that every move forward is bringing them closer to a bottomless abyss. The annual strategic cooperation launch and public bidding site for Yunfeng Group was chosen to be held in the banquet hall of the city's top 5-star hotel. The scene was bright with lights, with industry bigwigs, well-known investors, and major media reporters filling every seat. David wore an expensive custom suit, his face flushed, sitting in the front row. Beside him, Chloe was dressed in a flashy outfit, heavy makeup, pulling a few small media reporters to brag about their team's major technical breakthrough. In their view, winning this tens of millions strategic contract would not only fill the funding gap caused by the paralysis of Hongyuan Group's project, but also help them soar within the company. Ladies and gentlemen, next up we invite the second bidding company to come on stage and present its technical solution. The host's clear voice echoed through the banquet hall. Chloe adjusted her dress and strode to the podium with a triumphant look. She skillfully opened the PowerPoint, and the screen instantly displayed what appeared to be an extremely large and complex system architecture diagram. I sat in the corner of the first-row guest seats, wearing a minimalist, cool, sharp black suit, holding a glass of warm water, watching the two on stage with a gaze. Chloe spoke confidently on stage, throwing out a string of profound and obscure technical terms. But at a glance I recognized that it was essentially the unfinished draft plan I had left in the draft box before I resigned. They were desperate and panicked, making no attempt at bottom-level logical verification and compliance review, yet treating it as their nuclear weapon to grab the order. 5 minutes later, Chloe finished her speech, raising her head, looking like a victor as she surveyed the room and smiled. "That is the perfect solution our team built over 6 months, which I believe will bring unprecedented value to Yunfeng Group. May I have any questions from the experts?" The audience applauded sparsely. Many professional technical experts were looking down at their materials, brow furrowed, seeming to sense something but hesitant. David below the stage laughed so hard he could barely hold it in, ready to clap and celebrate. At that moment, I slowly lowered the water glass, smoothed the wrinkles on my suit, and elegant stood up. "I have a few questions for the speaker." My voice was crisp and forceful, spreading instantly through the hall via the sound system. All eyes turned toward me. When the self-satisfied Chloe on stage and the smiling David in the audience saw my face, their expressions froze in an instant. Their pupils dilated violently, as if they had seen a ghost. "One. Wenjing?" Chloe cried out in shock, the microphone amplifying her trembling voice to the extreme. David stood up abruptly from his seat, his lips trembling, pointing at me but unable to utter a complete sentence. The people who had searched the entire city for days were suddenly appearing here with such high-profile audacity. I ignored their astonishment, my gaze cold as a knife, directly staring at Chloe on stage, and asked bluntly, "First, the core algorithm of the third module you just demonstrated has a serious deadlock vulnerability in its data calling logic. When concurrency exceeds 5,000, the entire system will crash within 3 seconds. How did you perform high concurrency disaster recovery testing?" Second, I stepped forward one more pace, my voice rising sharply, with imposing momentum. "The security and compliance qualifications cited on slide 12 of your PPT, the authorization number belongs to an old standard that has been revoked. Publicly bidding without the latest national-level compliance certification is a serious commercial violation and false advertising. How does your company plan to explain this to Unifone Group and the present regulatory authorities?" As the words fell, the room exploded in an uproar. Oh my God, a dead loop vulnerability? If this goes online, how much damage would it cause? Even the compliance qualifications are expired? Isn't this blatant fraud to deceive bidders? The discussion swelled like a tide, industry bigwigs shaking their heads, eyes filled with disdain. Chloe on the stage turned pale as paper in an instant, cold sweat streaming down her forehead. She didn't understand anything about dead code loops or the vulnerabilities in qualification authorization, and she could only stammer an excuse, "You're talking nonsense. Stop shooting off at the mouth here. This is our team's secret, what could you possibly understand as an outsider?" Outsider? I sneered, turning and nodding slightly toward the backstage. The image on the big screen suddenly changed. Chloe's PPT was cut off in an instant, replaced by the official authorized demonstration interface of Xingyao Technology, along with my identification as Xingyao Technology's Chief Strategy Advisor and a full set of top-tier industry compliance certificates. Let me introduce myself, I'm Xingyao Technology's Chief Strategy Advisor, Wen Jing. I turned around, looking down at Chloe, who had completely collapsed on the podium, with an icy tone. "Every line of code architecture you just displayed was scraps I left behind. Using a flawed, unfinished plan to deceive clients, is that what you call a perfect plan?" In the audience, David was sweating profusely, rushing forward to grab the microphone to stop me. "Wen Jing. You're taking revenge. You're maliciously sabotaging the bid. Security, escort the disruptor out of the venue." Unifone Group's executives spoke coldly, their eyes full of disdain. A few tall security guards rushed forward, pinning the out-of-control David on both sides, dragging him out of the banquet hall like a dead dog. On stage, Chloe completely collapsed, under the gaze of countless cameras and industry heavyweights, losing face in front of everyone, crying as she ran off the stage. The bidding for Unifone Group had completely become a laughingstock for the entire industry. That night, video clips alleging the original company's fake qualifications in bidding and numerous technical flaws spread wildly within the industry circles. The company's stock opened with its limit down, and the board was furious. Early the next morning, the headquarters of the original company was enveloped in a stifling atmosphere of looming wind and rain. Senior management held an emergency compliance meeting, and the chairman attended in person, banging the table with a blue face and shouting, "Shame. You've dragged the company's reputation through the mud. Not only is Unifone Group's bid finished, but Hongyuan Group will also officially send us a lawyer's letter demanding compensation. If you don't give me a clear explanation today, all the responsible individuals will pack up and leave, and we will be prepared to compensate the company for its enormous losses." The meeting room fell silent, and all the middle managers lowered their heads, afraid the disaster would extend to them. In the corner, David's face turned pale, beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. He knew better than anyone that the fatal blow the company had suffered was entirely because he had been greedily seeking credit and rashly used my unfinished plan. If this accusation sticks, he would not only be fired but also face hefty recoupment by the company and would be reputation destroyed across the industry. At the brink of life and death, a trace of ruthlessness flashed in David's eyes. A fellow traveler in death does not die a poor monk. He decided to strike first. "Chairman, all of you, this matter is indeed a serious quality and compliance accident." David suddenly stood up, pointing at Chloe with righteous indignation, but I was also deceived. The project-specific liaison, data review, and bid preparation were all handled by Chloe alone. I warned her many times to verify qualifications and logic, but in order to grab credit, she not only forged technical data but also concealed the truth of expired qualifications. As a supervisor, I can at most be considered negligent oversight. The real instigator is her. Sitting beside him, Chloe, who had already been under intense mental strain, was completely stunned by these words. She looked incredulously at the man who had once whispered sweet nothings to her in bed, promising to promote and raise her salary, never imagining that in the face of life and death interests, this man would so eagerly push her out as a scapegoat. David! Are you still human? You're spouting nonsense. Chloe screamed hysterically, her sharp voice breaking the solemn silence of the meeting room. It was you who rushed to get the contract to fill Hongyuan Group's hole, forcing me to submit the draft left by Wenjing. You've known all along that the qualifications had expired. You said, anyway Yunfeng Group doesn't understand technology, first deceive them to get the advance payment. Now trouble has erupted, and you're pushing everything onto me? You're talking nonsense. Words are not proof. Do you have evidence? David shouted, eyes cold and fierce. Clearly it's your work mistake. Stop freaking out and biting people here. Evidence? You want evidence, is that it? Chloe completely lost it. She knew very well that if she should bear this black pot, her life would be ruined forever. She suddenly opened her handbag, pulled out a spare mobile phone, pressed the Bluetooth play button directly, and turned the volume up to the maximum. Immediately, an extremely clear audio recording filled the silent meeting room. David, Wenjing's set of plans seems to have problems. The compliance qualifications have expired too. Can we really submit it to Yunfeng Group's bid? Why be afraid? Wenjing is that stupid girl. She has already resigned and blacklisted us, and there's no hard evidence. Just tweak it a bit. As long as we swindle this tens of millions dollar big contract, the company won't investigate us, and I'll get a promotion. Then your benefits won't be missing either, and the reimbursement of several millions can be erased. As soon as the recording began to play, the whole room fell into dead silence. David's face suddenly turned deathly pale, colorless, the whole person slumping in the chair with eyes unfocused. The chairman's face shifted from pale to black. Veins bulging on his forehead, he slammed a palm down on the table and roared, "Reimbursement loopholes? Big orders duped into your hands? David, explain yourself." Chairman. I have more than just this recording. Chloe looked deranged, shrieking hysterically. David has been using his position to take supplier kickbacks for the past 3 years. Every time the company awards team bonuses, he takes out 30% and deposits it into his brother-in-law's private account. And his usual invoices are all for high-end club expenses with fake receipts for reimbursement. I have backups of the books and detail records. Trash. How dare you frame me? I'll kill you. Cornered and desperate, David completely lost his sanity, eyes blazing with anger as he roared, leaping toward Chloe like a maddened beast. He grabbed Chloe by the hair and slapped her hard across the face. Ah! Help! He hit me! Chloe screamed, her long fingernails clawing back at David's face with reluctance to be outdone, leaving several bloody scratches on David's face. The once high-ranking supervisor and the impeccably dressed department base now, in front of dozens of executives and colleagues, fought and wrestled on the conference room floor like two mad dogs, with screams, curses, and the clattering of tables and chairs filling the room. The executives stepped back in disgust, and the chairman, shaking with rage, pointed at the two on the floor and shouted, "Hit! Keep hitting! Security! Hold these two beasts down! Call the police! Immediately report to accounting." I sit at my desk in the Xingyao Tech office, watching the live on-site video quietly sent to me by a colleague. In the video, David's face is covered in blood, Chloe's clothes are torn and her hair is disheveled, the two being held down by security on the floor, still spurting the most vulgar language at each other. In the next 2 days, chaos had already engulfed the former company internally. But they thought internal audits and police reports were the worst possible outcome, unaware that the killer blow I had prepared for them had only just begun to unfold. At 9:30 in the morning, it was time for the former company employees to start arriving at work one after another. Several law enforcement vehicles with black emblems quietly parked at the entrance of the company building. Immediately afterward, more than a dozen uniformed inspectors with stern expressions, under the leadership of industry regulators and tax inspection officials, pushed open the doors of the company. "Everyone stop all work, leave your computers. Cooperate with the inspection." A clear and cold voice rang through the entire floor of office space. The originally noisy office fell silent in an instant. All employees stood frozen in place, exchanging puzzled looks, not even daring to breathe loudly. 2 days earlier, I had anonymously submitted through encrypted channels the complete chain of evidence I had privately organized and restructured in my past life to the tax authorities and the regulatory agencies. Not only did it contain detailed bank statements showing David's evasion of taxes by using 2 contracts and secretly setting up a petty cash fund over nearly 3 years, but also confidential emails showing Chloe assisting him in falsifying qualifications and subcontracting core business illegally. Each piece of evidence came with clear verification clues, as precise as a surgical knife in a whistleblowing guide. After the joint investigation team moved in, they quickly sealed off all ledgers, servers, and core computer equipment from the finance department and the first business unit. At this moment, David, wearing a celebratory outfit with his face wrapped in bandages, sat in his office trying to contact a lawyer. When he saw the tax inspectors suddenly barging in, he trembled all over and dropped his phone to the floor with a clatter. "Mr. David, is that right? We have received reports from the public that your department is involved in a huge tax evasion, forging official documents, and commercial bribery. Please cooperate with the investigation and present the details of your personal and related accounts." The lead inspector presented his credentials, his voice devoid of any warmth. David's face turned pale as paper, his legs went weak, nearly collapsing to his knees. He knew better than anyone that his accounts could not withstand any probe. If the personal transactions were audited, his kickbacks and off-book accounts would be exposed for all to see. Wait a moment. I have urgent business documents on my computer that need backing up. David forced himself to stay calm, his eyes flickering as he tried to block the computer host with his body, while his other hand secretly reached for the USB drive and power cable on the desk. On the other side, Chloe was even more panicked. Seizing the moment when the inspectors were verifying the list, she quietly returned to her workstation, intending to pull out the portable hard drive containing the illegal subcontracting contracts and falsification details and throw it into the trash. However, their moves had already been under the close surveillance of the regulators. "Don't move! What are you doing?" One inspector reacted quickly, stepping forward and grabbing David's hand as he attempted to unplug the power, restraining him firmly against the desk. Meanwhile, another staff member accurately seized Chloe as she tried to destroy evidence, taking a photo of the still-attached portable hard drive and sealing it into a waterproof evidence bag. Attempting to destroy evidence and obstruct national personnel from lawfully performing their duties constitutes an aggravation of the crime. The inspectors' expressions turned ashen as they issued their orders in a cold voice, informed the police. At the scene, apply mandatory measures to these 2 individuals. Cold handcuffs reflected dazzling light in the sun. With a click against their wrists, David and Chloe were securely restrained. Dozens of colleagues in the office were dumbfounded as they watched the scene. Once towering and arrogant as a supervisor, David and Chloe, who habitually looked down on others with scorn and sarcasm, were now like 2 kicked-out dogs, being escorted out of the company building by law enforcement officers, one on each side, under the contemptuous and astonished gazes of the crowd. Downstairs, a large number of journalists had gathered, armed with cameras, flashing magnesium lights non-stop, freezing their shameful, handcuffed faces in the news headlines forever. The news of the investigation team's entry and the handcuffing and removal hazed public opinion. In order to safeguard the listed stock price and prevent the regulatory storm from spreading to the entire group, the former company's parent company and its major shareholders held an emergency board meeting that afternoon and made the most decisive cut, abandoning the car to save the general. The company's official Weibo and major financial media simultaneously issued stern statements, attributing all illegal and irregular actions entirely to David and Chloe as personal crime and gross negligence, announcing their legal dismissal, and forming a special legal team to sue in court, pursuing tens of millions in losses caused by project paralysis, client claims, and brand damage. The capital that they once relied on for support has, in the blink of an eye, become a death warrant to squeeze them dry. After paying a huge bail, David and Chloe, who were released on bail and restrained from traveling abroad, temporarily left the detention center. But by then they had already lost everything. Their bank accounts were frozen, their houses seized by the court, their reputation in the industry was completely ruined, and even friends and relatives treated them as omens of calamity and avoided them. More terrifying was the tens of millions in recovery notices weighing on them like two mountains. With no way out, the two finally learned from insider industry sources a truth that shook their souls. The chief strategy advisor of Starry Shine Technology, who crushed them on the bid, secretly handed over the evidence to regulators, and is now high above all, was the same when Jing they drove away. One rainy night, I ended Starry Shine Technology's executive meeting, walking out of the office building hall with a black umbrella. Just as I reached the parking lot entrance, two drenched, exhausted figures suddenly sprang out from the nearby shrubbery and collapsed heavily onto their knees before me. Wenjing! Wenjing! Please, please, show mercy, give us a lifeline. Their voices were hoarse and desperate. I paused, raised the edge of my umbrella a little, and looked down at the kneeling pair with disdain. Once dapper and full of vigor, David now had tangled hair, a pale face, bruises at the corners of his eyes from fighting, and was bowing his head to me in the mud without any dignity. The once proud, snobbish Chloe trembled all over, her makeup ruined, crying heartbreakingly. Wenjing, sister. We were wrong. We really know we were wrong. Chloe clung to the edge of my shoe and cried. David ordered me back then. He wanted to trap you. If you're willing to sign a forgiveness letter for the court and say a word in front of the regulators, we'll repay you with everything we have. Please save us, we don't want to go to jail, we don't want to carry these huge debts for life. Wenjing. We were colleagues once. I was confused back then, and my eyes misled me. David also crawled forward, his voice trembling as he begged, for the sake of what we once were, please spare us this time. How much money do you want? As soon as I earn money in the future, I'll give it all to you. Please withdraw those documents. The former sentiment? Hearing those two words, I felt nothing but contempt and irony. In my previous life, when they forced me to the brink and I died a miserable death, did they ever consider a single cent of old affection? I slowly pulled out a stack of printed documents from my bag and slammed them down onto David's soaked face, looking down from above. Those were the complete chat records of how they secretly called me an idiot and a scapegoat, and quietly calculated how to devour me completely and send me to prison, from both this life and the last. The rain-soaked pages, every word on them, slapped back at them with the sound of a resounding slap. Old affection? I let out a cold laugh, my gaze as icy as this night rain. David, Chloe, look at what you yourself wrote. When you handed me the contract that plotted against me, when you schemed behind my back to get me to take the blame and go to prison, did you ever think of leaving me a way out? The two of them paled even more than the dead in an instant, shaking violently all over, and they could no longer utter a single word. Everything you are suffering today is not because I am too ruthless, but because you have committed too many evils and reaped what you sowed. I coldly withdrew my gaze, took a step back, dodging their touch, my tone completely devoid of warmth. The law will give you the fairest judgment. As for pleading? You'd better keep your strength to speak to the judge. After saying this, I no longer spared a look at the two men lying in the mud and water like lost dogs, turned and got into the car, and drove away in a cloud of dust. In the court's first trial chamber, the atmosphere was solemn and grave. The national emblem hung directly above the courtroom, emanating an inviolable majesty. On the defendant's bench, David and Chloe wore yellow inmate vests, handcuffs and leg restraints producing a cold, piercing clamor with every movement. In just 1 month, they had withered into shadows, their faces drawn and gaunt. David's hair was speckled with gray, his gaze scattered. Chloe hung her head, her body thin to the bone, no longer the once swaggering and refined figure. The prosecution bench was piled high with thick bundles of files. Not only did they face multi-million yuan civil compensation claims brought by their former company, but they also faced heavy criminal charges from the prosecution for embezzlement in office, industrial espionage, and forging official documents of a state organ. Bring in the key witness for this case. The judge tapped the gavel, the sound loud and crisp. The side door of the courtroom slowly opened. I, dressed in a sharp gray tailored suit, walked steadily to the witness stand. The moment they saw me, David and Chloe on the defendant's bench jolted upright, their eyes reddened, filled with resentment, fear, and despair. Witness Wenjing, please provide a truthful account of the illegal and irregular acts you observed by the defendants David and Chloe during the project operation. The judge looked at me solemnly. I nodded slightly, calm in demeanor, my voice clearly echoing through the entire courtroom, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury. The defendant David has long exploited the convenience of his direct supervisory position to embezzle the company's assets in multiple projects by falsely reporting procurement costs, privately establishing petty funds, and other means. Here is my cross-check of the defendant's personal bank statements with private transfers from suppliers, sufficient to prove that the amount embezzled in his official capacity reaches several million yuan. I presented the first piece of electronic evidence. The large screen instantly displayed a series of shocking transfer records, with amounts, times, and accounts clearly visible. David's defense attorney's face changed color, hastily standing up to try to parry. Objection. Objection to the testimony's unilateral provision of electronic evidence. These transactions cannot directly prove a causal link to the defendant's official conduct. Objection overruled. The authenticity of the evidence has been confirmed by the Judicial Authentication Center. The judge sustained the ruling. I sneered softly and then produced the second major piece of evidence, the complete audio file I recorded in the Chapter 1 conference room, along with the later contract appraisal report. Furthermore, I turned my head, eyes like blades directed at the two on the defendant's bench, the defendants David and Chloe, in order to conceal their project losses and compliance loopholes, knowingly used moral coercion and workplace intimidation to induce me to sign the contract. In the audio, the defendant David personally promised, if anything goes wrong, I'll shoulder it, and the original contract bears key handwriting alterations, proving that the signing did not reflect my true will, but was a deliberate setup by the two of them. The recording was played in court, and David's wild, coercive voice was clear and discernible. Then the prosecution presented the full chain of evidence, the company's financial loopholes, forged qualification certificates, and tax evasion, all as nails hammering their crimes to the iron plate. With such a detailed body of electronic evidence, bank statements, forensic reports, and my airtight, logical testimony, the defense's pale explanation seemed utterly ridiculous. Faced with this unbreakable evidence chain, David could no longer hold it together on the defendant's bench. His legs gave way, and he collapsed, kneeling hard on the bench, tears and snot streaming down his face as he clung to the bars and shouted, I plead guilty. I plead guilty. Your Honor, I was simply confused for a moment. Please give me a chance to reform. And Chloe was so frightened that she collapsed to the ground on the spot, hyperventilating and shouting, It's none of my business. It was all David's orders. Your Honor, I was forced into it. The courtroom fell silent, only their despairing and ugly cries echoing. At 3:30 p.m. The presiding judge slowly stood up and solemnly read the first instance judgment. The defendant David is guilty of embezzlement in the line of duty, industrial espionage, and forgery of official documents. Multiple offenses punished jointly. Sentenced to 15 years imprisonment, with all personal property confiscated and all illicit gains recovered. The defendant Chloe is guilty of participating in embezzlement in the line of duty, forgery of official documents, and defamation, sentenced to 7 years imprisonment, and shall bear joint civil compensation responsibility. The cold gavel struck heavily, producing a dull, thunderous sound. 15 years. 15 years, my life is ruined. David let out a desperate, terrible scream, his vision going dark, and he fainted in court. Chloe was forcibly dragged away by the bailiffs, letting out a despairing howl like a mother beast. As the dust of the court's verdict settled, the criminal penalties against David and Chloe shredded the last veil of cover from the original company. This industry-shaking scandal, like a severe earthquake, sent the entire company plunging into an irrecoverable abyss. The day after the verdict was announced, the original company's public relations department completely collapsed. Due to the conviction for embezzlement and forgery of official documents, all core business contracts previously signed by the original company were deemed to have serious compliance defects. Dozens of core clients who had worked with them for years, to avoid risk, unilaterally terminated cooperation and, according to contract terms, claimed enormous liquidated damages. Hung Yuan Group was hit first, directly using the court's ruling to freeze all of the original company's bank accounts and fixed assets, demanding compensation for tens of millions of yuan in losses caused by project delays. The cash flow was utterly broken. Outside the company's office building, every day there were crowds of angry suppliers, employees' unpaid wages, and clients filing claims, surrounding the building and blocking the main entrance with banners. The once glamorous office area was now in shambles, computers removed, desks smashed, and the air filled with despair and ruin. The company's top executives and shareholders, who once stood high and decisively abandoned David and Chloe for profit, were now like ants on a hot pot. The stock price collapsed to the brink of delisting, financing was unavailable, and investors pulled out. In just the third week after the verdict took effect, the original company, unable to repay its enormous debts, formally petitioned the court for bankruptcy liquidation. This former dominant, glittering industry leader collapsed in the span of a month, like a pillarless building suddenly pulled away. And those former colleagues who had taunted me in the office, who had backed Chloe and David, who had stabbed me in the back, also faced their overdue retribution. With the company's bankruptcy, they were all laid off, receiving no severance pay, and more terrifyingly, their names were listed in the industry's HR integrity blacklist alongside this massive compliance scandal. In the following months, these people carried resumes to major job fairs, but were uniformly rejected at the door. Whenever interviewers saw a resume listing the original company and cross-checked the participants of the year's major incident, they would not hesitate to throw the resume in the trash. A few of Chloe's former close aides, burdened with the black histories of participating in fraud and lacking professional ethics, lost their footholds in the industry and could only switch to extremely hard and poorly paid manual labor, living in dire straits. On the other hand, the independent studio I led, Xingyao Technology, rose during this industry-wide reshuffle. Thanks to a stunning performance at the Yunfeng Group bidding conference and impeccable compliance and technology, my team earned the industry's highest reputation and trust. During the original company's bankruptcy liquidation, under my precise planning and capital operations, Xingyao Technology legally acquired the original company's best technology patents and client resources at a remarkably low price. Those core clients who had abandoned the original company came to our door, bringing with them billions in cooperation proposals, and knocked down the doors of my office. A year later, on the top floor of the city's premier commercial landmark building, in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling window, sunlight pours into the executive office spanning hundreds of square meters, reflecting my tall, capable silhouette. The name of the new company is prominently engraved on the door plate, my entirely owned, independently formed new commercial empire. Over the past year, I led the team to complete a comprehensive takeover of the original company's high-quality assets and market share. The industry landscape, once stirred into chaos by David and Chloe, was completely reshuffled under my iron-handed methods. Now, my company's market value has multiplied several times, leaping to become the most influential and authoritative upstart in the industry. Major financial media crown me the leader with the highest commercial value of the year, and countless top talents flock to me. Those fringe figures in the industry who used to watch me make a fool of myself in the old company, or even subtly step on me, now don't even have the chance to hand a business card to my assistant. Mr. 1. These are 3 new 100 million level strategic agreements signed this quarter. Please take a look. The secretary came in with a respectful tone, placing the thick files on my desk, and then handed me a yellowed letter, hesitating a moment, also. This is a registered mail forwarded from a women's prison and a detention center. The sender is signed as David. Hearing that long-forgotten name, my eyes showed no ripple. I took the letter and tore open the seal at random. The paper was creased with wrinkles, the handwriting messy and skewed, exuding a sense of desperate and stifled decay. In the letter, the imprisoned David used the most humble, most obsequious words. He wrote that he did the heaviest, dirtiest physical labor every day in prison. Because of enormous debts and criminal charges, he couldn't even get enough to eat and was bullied. He wrote that Chloe in prison, due to a mental breakdown, roared my name all day in a delirium begging for mercy, even losing a tooth in a fight over food with others in the cell. He cried that he knew he was wrong and begged me to consider our past joint battles and spare some prison living expenses for him, even humbly promising that after release he would be my slave, waiting on me, serving tea and water. Not only that, at the end of the letter he shamelessly wrote, "Wen Jing, if it weren't for me handing you the project back then, you wouldn't have the chance to display your abilities today. In a sense, I am also your benefactor. You can't be so ruthless." Looking at those hypocritical, ridiculous, and utterly shameless pleas on the letter, I curved my lips into a cold and ironic smile. Benefactor? Serving tea and water? I wasn't even interested in finishing the letter. I crumpled it into a ball and tossed it aside. Snap. The sheet of paper was hurled into the nearby shredder without hesitation. As the machine shredded, the letter of remorse, moral coercion, and despair was reduced to ash in 3 seconds. Once, I thought the end of revenge was to see the enemy collapse in blood and dust at my feet. But standing at this height today, I finally understand, the cruelest and most thorough retaliation against them is not endless entanglement and sinking them in the pit, but to live every single moment of my life brilliantly and brilliantly, keep them far behind me, until they fade into dust and my life's resume, a speck I can't even bother to glance at again. The gloom of the past, the tragedy of a previous life, and those ugly, hateful faces, at this moment, have completely vanished into ash. I turned around and faced the vast floor-to-ceiling window again. Beyond, there is the boundless blue sky, merging with the skyline of a prosperous city. The wind from the high sky sweeps by, carrying the scent of freedom and victory. The assistant pushed the door open to report, "Mr. Wen, the opening speech for the Industry Peak Forum is in 3 minutes, and all the bigwigs and media are waiting for you on stage." I smoothed the cuffs of my suit a little. The woman in the mirror has a sharp gaze and an imposing presence, no longer the timidity and hesitation of being at others' mercy in the past. In this rebirth, I have not only severed all shackles and trampled my enemies into an eternal hell, but also, with my own wisdom and decisiveness, stood at the pinnacle of this industry. The road ahead is long and bright. My legend has only just begun.